My name is Craig Anderson, and for the past 6 years, I've been studying awe as a PhD student in Dacher Keltner's lab in the Department of Psychology right here at Cal. Talking about awe and how we research it is one of my favorite things to do, so it's a real pleasure to be with you here today. One of the most common questions I get about the work that I do is, how do you measure awe? So at face value, that seems like a pretty straightforward question, but it's something that we've really had to grapple with in our research over the last few years. How do you take something that can be powerful and complex and beautiful and have the power to change people's lives and turn that into statistics and bar graphs, the currency of scientists, and still capture the meaning of those experiences in a way that's true to the people who have them? So today in my talk, I'm going to show you how we've addressed this challenge of measuring awe in a study that we did with people who got into the outdoors and went on whitewater rafting trips. And at the very end, I'll give you a little sampling of some of the findings that we have at this point, which I hope will nicely set the stage for Stacy Baer and also the conversation we'll be having later. So before I go into the research, I want to sort of characterize the partnership we had with the Sierra Club that made this work possible. So as a young grad student, one of the things that was immediately apparent was the power of nature to elicit awe reliably and powerfully. And Stacy Baer of the Sierra Club heard that we were doing this work on awe, and he said, hey, the Sierra Club has these great programs in the Bay that get people into the outdoors. What if we started a research collaboration that looked at how awe specifically and being in the outdoors more generally impacts people's physical and mental and social well-being? So out of this collaboration, we were able to get two unique groups involved in our research. The first through the Sierra Club's Inspiring Connections Outdoors program, and they work with adolescents from underserved communities who don't usually have the resources to get into the outdoors and take them out on these whitewater rafting trips. What struck me about this group was that over half of these kids had never been out in nature before like this, ever before in their lives. So not only was this a rich opportunity to study awe, but I was gratified that we were giving this experience to people who had never had it before. And the second population that we're working with is military veterans, and we're working to ramp up that research. So we have two groups of people here that obviously face physical and mental and emotional challenges, and I think two groups that can especially stand to benefit from the power of the outdoors. So as I mentioned, the context for this research is taking people out whitewater rafting. We did both 2-day trips and 1-day trips up on the South Fork American River, which is by Sacramento. It's the most commercially rafted river in the United States. And when your psychology lab looks like this, how do you go about measuring awe? So I categorize our approach. Click, click. I'm too young not to be able to work PowerPoints. There we go. So I break our approach down into 4 different categories. The most straightforward approach is just asking people about their experience. So that takes the form of some closed-ended questions. How much awe did you feel on a scale of 1 to 7? But we also gave people daily diaries as well, so that they could tell us in their own words the awe experiences they had on the trip. So we wanted to do those narratives, and I'll show you some of them in a little bit, just to capture the breadth of awe experience and emotional experience that people had, so we weren't just sort of imposing our ideas onto people. The second category, which Dacher talked about a little bit, is physiology. So we collected saliva from participants. We use this to genotype for genes that code for receptors in the brain that are sensitive to dopamine, a neurotransmitter. And we also collected saliva before and after the trip to measure hormones like cortisol and also markers of immune function like inflammatory cytokines to see how people's emotional experiences during the trip predicted changes in those physiological measures. We also used peer reports. So in addition to asking people to talk about their own experience, we also asked them to nominate some of their peers that they might have noticed had an especially strong experience of awe and how connected they felt to those people. And the final piece of our awe measurement approach was expressive behavior. So we gathered this data using GoPro cameras that were suction cupped to the front of each of the rafts, looking back at the participants. I'm happy to report we have not lost a single GoPro camera yet. And just filming the entire trip. So we have over 100 hours of HD footage of these people going on whitewater rafting trips. And we do what's called behavior coding with this footage. So I have a team of research assistants who watch these film clips for key sort of moments like going through rapids, and then they categorize the presence or absence or perhaps the intensity of key behaviors that we are really well defined and we're very specific about them. And that's how we sort of quantify footage like that. And I'll be showing you some of that a little bit later. But our approach here, kind of the takeaway, is that we're not leaning on any one methodology to kind of measure awe. It's our hope that all of these different channels will sort of converge on a story and give us some more information about how awe and other positive emotions operates out in nature and how that impacts downstream well-being. So now I'd like to show you some of the footage that we had and then give you a little flavor about the types of things that we code for in this footage. All right. So as you can see, this is extremely rich behaviors that are happening. We have emotion being expressed in the face, in the voice. We have the paddle high fives going on. These are all things that we code for in these videos. But one of the most important ones, of course, that we're interested in is emotion expression. So we code for a few different emotions. Of course, one of them that we code for is awe. And here today, to help me sort of show you what that looks like, is Steph Curry right here. Perhaps some of you have heard of him before. So it turns out Steph is really expressive, and he's going to help us show off these emotions today. So here we have the prototypical expression of awe. We're seeing the raised eyebrows, right? A little opening of the eyes to make them wider. And then we have the mouth hanging open. You can imagine maybe he said, whoa, or wow, like you guys did before. If Steph Curry's feeling awe about something that happened in basketball, you know that it must have been pretty good. It turns out babies as well are little awe machines. When everything's bigger than you and everything's new in the world, you're going to be feeling a lot of awe. And finally, this is one of our participants showing the awe expression. This was the big first rapid that was coming up, and he was reacting to that. Okay, here we have another expression. A lot of you are probably familiar with this. But here Steph's horsing around with Draymond Green. So this we call amusement. Other names for this might be mirth or play. And we know that play plays a critical role in how people learn about social boundaries and learn about their physical world around them. So we wanted to code for that as well. So we got a lot of amusement, obviously, and you saw some of that in our rafting footage. Now, this is an emotion that you don't see Steph Curry express very often. So this is shame. We didn't actually code for shame because we didn't see it in our footage, but the emotion we did see is being expressed by President Obama here, who had just beaten Steph Curry in Connect 4. So we have the expansive posture right, the hands pumped in the air, maybe a little smile, and we saw a lot of that in our footage as well. So we have these 3 different positive emotions we code for, and the key here is that when we're looking at our outcomes, we can say, oh, it's not just awe that's related to these things, but it's awe over and above these other positive emotions that we measured. Okay, now I'd like to take you through some of the narratives that we collected, just to give you an idea of what those look like. So kind of a similar idea, we have coders look at these and identify key themes that we're interested in. We apparently had a young John Muir on one of our trips. So she's talking about smoke rolling over the hills. There was water cresting and breaking over the boat. I felt wonder. So an appreciation of the beauty of nature is one of the themes that we see a lot in our diaries. The second is social connection. So like Dacker said, and Professors Piff and Steller will talk about later, is awe helps people connect to others and fold into social collectives. So here we have the person writing, I cooperated with my team and created an amazing bond with them. Finally, this is my favorite one. Today was the first time I ever went water rafting. I was totally scared about the rapids, but I conquered my fears. I also jumped into the water even though I couldn't swim. So that's one of the really interesting things about awe, right? We come into contact with things that are vast, that we don't fully understand, and it makes us feel capable of facing our fears and addressing these challenges. Okay, to give you a quick sampling of these findings, the subject of my dissertation was how genes are related to emotion expression, and we indeed found that that dopamine receptor gene predicted the awe that people reported and also different narratives that emerged from their diaries. We also found that the hormone cortisol predicted people's emotional experience. So the emotional experience they had out on the water predicted their levels at the end of the rafting trip. We also found that awe is related to greater curiosity. So when we're faced with things that are vast that we don't fully understand, we want to gather more information from the environment. We're more curious about our social and our physical surroundings. We also found that, I don't know if I mentioned, we followed up with people 1 week after the trip to see how they're doing with well-being and whatnot, and compare that with before trip levels. 1 week after the trip, all of our participants across the board reported greater social well-being. So fighting or not fighting with friends and family, feeling like you're a valued member of a community. With the veterans that we looked at, we saw almost a 30% decrease in PTSD, which is a huge effect. I suspect that that will get a little smaller as we gather more, but still, this is a compelling pattern that we want to explore. And finally, in both of the samples across the board, we saw people reporting less stress 1 week after they went on a whitewater rafting trip. So today I've given you a little taste of how we measure awe, and I've given you a taste for some of the findings that we have this far. And so now I'm going to go ahead and cede the floor to Stacy Baer, and hopefully we'll have a good conversation after that. So thank you for your attention.